Hail, and welcome back to my Gods and Goddesses series. Today we will be discussing the Irish Celtic goddess Morrigan, or the Morrigan, or the Morrigu, as she sometimes also is known. She's also known by a slew of other, to me, as a Dutch person, frankly unpronounceable names, probably. My Gaelic is, if you can imagine, a little rusty, so I will not bother embarrassing myself in trying. But there are plenty of other names that this deity and aspects of this deity is associated with. Now, I first would like to start off with saying that I actually have worked with Morrigan, as I just call her Morrigan, a lot more than I have actually done with many of deities from my own pantheon, which is, if you are new to this channel, the Germanic/Norse pantheon. I think in some ways I've even worked more with her than I have with Odin. um, and this is kind of a bit of a strange plot twist because my best friend, whom I live with, actually works a lot with De Morgan and introduced me to her as such. Because before then I was strictly or mostly strictly focused on the getting to know and working with the Germanic/Norse pantheon in that sense. I was by that point already eclectic, of course, because once I left Christianity, didn't really feel like I wanted to adhere to that whole "thou shalt have no other gods before me" nonsense. But regardless, that is neither here nor there. Um, that is also not the point of this video. This is a dedicational video that I am making in honor of the Lady Morgan. Her name sometimes is translated as the Phantom Queen or Great Queen, among other things. Morrigan is a goddess that is most often associated with magic, with battle, with death, with transformation in the sense of death, reincarnation, crows, rulership, fate, you name it. She's often said to be comprised of a trinity of goddesses, and the names of those goddesses are, and again, excuse my pronunciation, I am not from that area of the world. I have no in-depth knowledge of Gaelic or any other form of Celtic language that may be spoken there. So, namely, Buth, Macha or Maka, and Namain. Or alternatively, Namain is replaced by Anand. And again, apologies if I butchered any and all of those names. So, in her capacity as a Phantom Queen, she has strong connection to the Banshee spirits. It is said that those of Irish descent who witness a Banshee may see them as a herald of their oncoming death. Now, it's funny because I have actually met Banshees in my work. I am of Dutch descent, aka of a Germanic lineage. I have no fear of these spirits. I have no innate dread when I encountered them. I had no, negative feelings associated with them. I just thought that this is a dead female Irish individual, and I sat there for a while, and in meditation, chatted with them a little bit, and yeah. But it is apparently, as my friend whom I live with can attest to, quite common because she does have Irish descent, Irish lineage in her, even though she is also partially German. Um, that there is a sort of an innate dread. Now, this apparently is in many ways related to the myths that one sees and hears about when one researches the Morrigan, where it is often said that warriors who are about to meet their fate in battle, where they're about to die, that they will have dreams or visions of Morrigan washing their blood-stained armor in a river or in some other form of or other body of water. And I found that to be quite interesting because, I mean, it is apparently something unique to people of that lineage, of that descent. And I mean, I have heard the Banshee wail, and while it is absolutely shrieky and, you know, piercing in that sense, it did not fill me with an innate dread in that particular sense. I mean, it is quite an interesting thing to hear because I am clairaudient. I do sometimes hear spirits, shall we say. So, I mean, it may just be me because I am used to hearing stuff that is not necessarily physically present every now and then. But yeah, I cannot personally attest to the effects that this has in such a manner, but it does seem to be a thing. So, point in case, if the Morrigan or a Banshee reveals themselves to one of Irish descent, apparently she is hailed as a herald of death or an announcer of death or of fate in that particular sense. So Morrigan often appears to me personally as a pale-skinned, slender, and relatively tall woman with straight black hair. Usually this hair is slightly past shoulder length. Now, I have heard other people describe her in similar fashion to me, where she has a thinner, somewhat longer shaped face and a thin, somewhat hooked nose. She often wears a white gown or dress whenever I see her for some reason, because many other people, particularly women, tell me that she often wears black dresses to them, which I find strange. I don't quite know what that means, but any and all suggestions and comments are welcome, I suppose. Um, so sometimes when a message is being delivered from her, I would hear crows. Like I said, I sometimes hear stuff. And when there is about to be an event that I need to be warned of, I will hear crows squawking, or in some other way, shape, or form trying to get my attention. It is often said that Morrigan shapeshifts. She often is said to shapeshift into a black crow. This may be perceived by some as a ominous omen. And indeed, in many cases, when I do hear that crow squawking at me, I will somehow be about to be attacked by either spiritual beings or by beings who are currently incarnate as human beings and who for some reason have it in for me, who will then start launching spells, etc. So oftentimes I actually take this as a warning, which in my personal opinion as someone who practices spiritual warfare, is a very positive thing. She is a deity, like I said, that has been linked to shapeshifting. It is the taking on of the personality, the taking on of the attributes of the mindset of that particular animal, and the channeling and the calling down of the totemic energies of such particular beings. Let that be very clear. And of course, you do see this the world over. I mean, you have the Jaguar warriors and all sorts of other, like the Ovdanar, the wolf warriors, and animals the world over. You see this in Africa, you see this in the Mesoamerican world, you see this in the Germanic world, in the Celtic world, and so on and so forth. So Morrigan can assist those magicians, those practitioners who are in any way, shape, or form interested, or who feel that they have a gift in that sense, to refine this, to facilitate this, to empower you, to teach you things in this regard. Speaking on the topic of the crow, death in this sense, and the transformative energy. Now, for those of you who have seen my I was video, the Elder Fufag rune I was is of course the rune of death. It is also the rune of the yew tree, which is the warding off of scavengers. That's why the yew tree was planted. The yew tree is also a very sturdy, very strong kind of material, a kind of tree, and it is also the world tree Yggdrasil in our own personal mythology. But not to get too much off of course here, what I am getting at is the rune I was is also a transformative rune. It is a close distinction or a close link that is established between the rune I was and the death card of the tarot deck, where death is often seen in a very symbolic sense and not so much in a literal sense. Now, that does not mean that death, in the terms of Morrigan and her relation to death, is not literal sometimes, because it is. Just like one of my pets died during my initiation into the rune of Aiwas. So that very much showed me that I was very much sometimes about literal death. So, and I'm laughing at this now. Of course, it's more than a year later. It's not laughing because I'm amused. It is because of how to put this. It is a tragic, cruel but somewhat ironic and twist of fate that I absolutely did not see coming, and that I, in hindsight, am a little bit like, what the fuck about, but as such things go, as such initiations as I'm undergoing go, this is the kind of thing that you may or may not be working with. And Morrigan is, of course, a goddess who is someone who symbolizes symbolic death, and who also deals with actual death, because she is also a goddess of war, and what happens in war, people die. So, in that sense, her association with the crow, as a carrion bird, as a bird of prey, where a crow scavenges the battlefield to pick away at the corpses of fallen warriors. Some may find this to be a very gross, maybe even insulting kind of imagery, as a sort of fuck you to the fallen warriors that are now being eaten. That is, however, not the way I see it. The body is a vessel, the soul has moved on. Um, and in that sense, Morrigan can also function as a sort of cycle pump for those that have fallen. She can lead them away, she can make sure that they move on to their next destination. Um, and at the same time, I actually think that it is repurposing things. It is transforming things from one thing, utilizing it as a body for the individual that was previously housed in this particular body, and now it is food for a being that keeps the land clean from things that would otherwise cause disease, that would otherwise cause more suffering in some way, shape, or form. So, in that sense, I feel that she is both a literal death goddess and a goddess of symbolic death, who can transform things for the better, or at the very least repurpose them where necessary. In other words, to take away the old, to start the new. And taking, in this case, in the example of the fallen warriors, taking the essence of the fallen, giving them new life elsewhere, and what remains behind of them is now redistributed to fit other purposes, as is the way of nature, of course. And we will get more into that aspect of nature and earth down the line. So Morrigan is also a deity that is associated with, throughout the mythologies that relate to her, that involve her, with politics, with protection of territories, land, etc. She can therefore assist, I imagine, with solving neighborly disputes, diplomatic issues, and other matters that are associated with lands, drawing borders, etc. And in my experience, as someone who, like I said earlier, practices spiritual warfare, she has been an invaluable ally in establishing spiritual boundaries and borders. And this can take the form of house protection, this can take the form of claiming a piece of spiritual land, or holding it, protecting it from hostile spirits, that sort of thing. So you can call on her in that particular sense as well. She is, in my personal experience, as you may have guessed, a deity who is primarily a goddess of war and magic, but that may just be because those are the two things that I mostly approach her for. Now, it is for this reason that she is one of the gods that I work with most, aside from perhaps Odin and several other different deities from my own pantheon. And as I have mentioned earlier, I will be making a video on Inari Okami, of course, the Japanese deity of commerce, finances, etc., who is also a deity that I actually have recently been working with very closely. Um, And this, to get back on my main story, is not because I am a physical warrior in this lifetime. Again, let me reiterate that. I am in no way, shape, or form claiming to be a soldier. I wanted to join the army, as I have outlined before, but I got rejected, and I was called to my spiritual shamanic path in doing what I currently do. So that is why I still work with war gods, if you will. I do not invoke them because I physically go to battle, but because I magically go to battle. So it is the work that I do as a spiritual warrior, as a shaman, that draws me to her, and that has drawn me to Odin, that has drawn me to Thor, to Tyr, and Freya, and many other gods and goddesses who are in some way, shape, or form related to such matters. And because many of these deities, and you kind of see a pattern here, are also deeply involved with the tutelage of magic and the initiation of humans who are involved with magic, with certain systems, as is the case with, of course, Odin with the runes and various other deities so inclined. This is also another reason why I strongly have felt compelled and eager to work with these beings and deities, Morrigan included. And to take that a little further, the Celts and the Germanic people have obviously throughout history had a very rich interconnective past with each other. I mean, we happily went raiding each other's coasts and, invading each other and stuff like that. Um, so we have had a lot of intermingling of cultures there, and I think that because of those wars, make no mistake, it is not just wars that have come about, but it has also been the creation of new lineages, of new traditions, of new customs, etc., that have survived even to this day. Because these people intermingled, they interbred, they had children who grew up with the cultures from both their parents, etc., etc. And I think that it is for this reason that I find such a easy connection with this particular deity in that sense. And there is, with most deities outside of my own pantheon, always a little bit of a, you are not from my pantheon. However, I like you, and I know I'm not initiated into your tradition specifically in this lifetime, but there is an appeal and a draw there, and I do a little bit feel this with the Morrigan, but it is actually far, far less so with her than with some other deities that I have recently worked with now. Partially, this could, of course, be because well, I know her a lot better than the other deities, but yeah, it is what it is. So in my thorough and in-depth dealings with her, I have found her to be a very helping, although somewhat snarky and sarcastic individual from time to time. In my thorough and in-depth dealings with her, I have found her to be a very helping, although somewhat snarky and sarcastic individual from time to time. And that is not to say I find her an unpleasant person. I actually do appreciate a good deal of snark and sarcasm in the right situations. Um, but she has absolutely come to my aid more than once in various situations, like I mentioned earlier, warnings given of incoming attacks, magical or spiritual. Um, she has come to my aid directly against my foes. She has intervened in terms of providing protection in the form of spirits that were stationed with either myself or someone that I loved that needed help or protection from someone in some way, shape, or form. She has provided magical shields and other things. And make no mistake, oftentimes these things do not come for free. This usually does mean that you will have to sacrifice something or do something in some way, shape, or form to, of course, facilitate the services of Morrigan. And this is not something unique to Morrigan. This is actually something that you see with most deities. Most pagan deities will require you to, give something in return for their assistance, which I find only reasonable. It is a transaction that you make. And it is the case that you will start seeing discounts, quote unquote, the more that you work with someone, because you develop a bond, a link with them. And I have certainly seen this with Morrigan, with Odin, for example. And you know, so she has, for example, also helped me with learning how to do certain kinds of magics. The first time that I ever had to undo a curse, which was very sudden, my friend was in a delirious state for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I basically called on Morrigan and said, "Listen, I think that this friend of mine is under attack because they nearly, had things happen to them that just shouldn't have happened. Illusions were coming to the fore. They saw things that weren't there. They saw things that were, and I'm talking physical objects here. I'm not talking about spirits or something along the lines. Like the thing that happened was my friend was in a car and suddenly there was no car there, but there was actually a car there. And they nearly crashed into each other as a result of this. And this friend of mine was obviously cursed, and I called on Morrigan and she showed me how to undo this curse. Basically, I meditated and got the information downloaded, for lack of a better word, and the curse was extracted within the hour and sent back to the one who sent it. And my friend immediately just, rejuvenated. That was quite impressive to see. So I had never done that before that point, but she was the one who showed me here's how to strip that away. And I'm very grateful for that because my friend would likely have been dead in some way, shape, or form now had I not been able to take action in that regard. Morrigan is, in my experience, in terms of personality, aside from what I previously said, a deity who is rather no nonsense. And as someone who likes to think that they are in their approach when there is a situation to be handled, I am someone who is of the opinion that if there's a problem, handle it. The end. Don't bitch, don't whine, don't moan. And in my experience, Morgan is similar to this. She is a very straight to the point individual, and I very much appreciate that about her. At the same time, I do feel that she is often sympathetic to a person's circumstances, but that does not mean that she is not expecting you to do your part in remedying it. So if you set out to do a task, she does expect you to give it what you got, in other words. So as mentioned, Morrigan is a goddess of magic, of battle, of death, and of earth. She can therefore be a great assistance in those seeking to defend themselves, like I said, in conflict of a variety of natures, as well as those who seek to learn magic, particularly those of a darker nature, whether that is curse protection, whether that is healing curses, whether that is cursing. Um, Magic associated with lunar energies, energies of earth magic, utilization of herbs, of plants, of stuff like that. Um, as I said, she can provide spiritual protection in the shape of spirits, spells, etc. And for women in particular, I think that Morgan is a very empowering goddess who shows and displays, much like our own Freya, um, that war and battle need not just be the domains of men, if you are so inclined, of course. And I think that she is a deity that can inspire women to embrace the energies that are traditionally, and please mark how I phrase this, that are traditionally, historically, and culturally seen as being related to the domain of men and masculinity. And I think that at the same time, this deity also shows you that that does not mean that you have to, therefore, in order to engage with this, forsake your femininity in doing so. So, related to her death aspect, she is a mother goddess who resides over rebirth, and there we have this death and transformation aspect that I talked about earlier again, both in a literal and symbolic sense. So she may therefore be a good deity to call on if you wish to have an honest opinion on, how to improve yourself, how to improve your situation, or if you wish to directly work with her, perhaps through spell work or some other sort of meditative, spiritual, magical rites that are aimed at self-improvement and transmutation work. Morrigan also has an aspect to her, like Freya, that is related to love and passion. So I have personally not really engaged with this side of her, partially again due to the aforementioned Freya, because that is my own pantheon, of course, and I mostly personally work with Freya and her brother to find, a spouse to assist myself in becoming the best man and spouse that I could possibly be, that sort of thing with these two deities. But I imagine that for those who may work more with the Irish Celtic traditions or who are feeling a very strong drawn connection to the Morrigan, that she will be a very valuable deity in this asset as well. However, I would say that from what I know of her, that she is someone who will give you a very honest, blunt opinion on your issues. And if she says that you need to fix something, then it is likely that you need to fix something. And if she tells you to stop moping about this person or that situation, it is recommended that you listen to it. Overall, I think that the Morrigan, in any and all of her aspects, is a very versatile deity who you can call on in many different situations for many different needs, desires, in order to develop yourself in physical, mental, and a spiritual capacity. By that I mean to say that as a deity that presides over magic, she can help us harness and improve upon our spellcasting, our ability to energetically heal and regenerate, and then of course we are particularly working with these lunar energies that we mentioned before, the energies of the earth element, because she is of course after all a very strong earth deity, earth goddess, and of course lunar energies are directly related to water energies, and they are also traditionally considered feminine energies. Solar is usually more related to fire and also more related to masculinity. So a concept that is, in my experience, also, for example, very strongly reflected in the rune Burkano, where we see a very similar pattern of maiden, mother, crone, of birth, life, death, and of regeneration, of the life cycle, basically. So Morrigan can be a very empowering, healing, regenerative, nurturing, and feminine goddess, and who can help us better understand the whole threefold principle. And again, in particularly for women, where this whole maiden, mother, crone cycle is more relevant, of course, to whom this is more relevant to, I should say. She may be a very empowering and strengthening goddess to call upon. And in that sense, she can also help women in particular, of course, because men don't menstruate. You can take something that may initially seem like a curse, like something that is just, hurting, that is just painful, but that can provide a very unique, female only kind of energy, a very unique kind of female power from a magical perspective that men obviously don't have access to in the utilization of menstrual energies for magic. So Morrigan, in that sense, could also be perceived as a sex goddess in that sense, where she can help you with sex magic, if you will, or feminine magic, or whatever you want to label it. Depending on how you utilize it, I suppose it could be both or either. And I think that this is a very interesting way of transmuting something that may originally be perceived as a curse. Because, I mean, I am a man, a biological man, so I can only imagine what it feels like to menstruate once a month and go through that pain. I have no idea how you do it. It seems rather unpleasant. So if you can transmute that in such a way, in such a mindset to empower yourself to utilize this for better spell casting, to bring about more powerful magic, to bring about changes of a positive nature in your life, then this seems like a very strengthening, nurturing, uplifting gift to me. She can help us become motivated to adapt, to change, to transmute, to transform in accordance with whatever situation that it is that we are facing. Because that is, of course, the way of nature, the way of the earth. The ones who are the most adaptable survive, and that is actually a very strong misnomer that we have in the general public when someone says the law of the jungle is that the strongest survive, but this is not actually the case. The most adaptable survive. And Morrigan is, of course, someone who can therefore also assist in this regard, in transforming ourselves, in transmutating our inner world, in our inner perception, so that the outer world will eventually conform to our inner changed being, because that is, of course, manifestation. That is, of course, a part of how magic works. And this partially involves acceptance of the natural cycle of things, to partially, learn to adapt to the things around you rather than just make sure that the things around you adapt to and conform to your will. Because it is better to accept the state of the world as it is currently, and therefore be able to understand it, to adapt to it, and to, from within, basically learn to change it and yourself where necessary, than it is to constantly be stuck in an endless cycle against it. Because that is, in my opinion, what the Abrahamic religions, for example, teach. They teach you that the physical is evil, that the physical is something that needs to be escaped because it is imperfect, etc., etc. And this is, from various magical perspectives, a very, very unhealthy mindset, of course, because it manifests into your reality in such a negative, state. Now, if you change your mind according to adaptation, then you are going to be more at peace with your situation. You're going to be more at peace with your surroundings. And this is, again, as I said, part of what magic actually is, of course, to transmute. Now, lastly, offerings to Morrigan would be alcoholic beverages, beer, wine, perhaps whiskey. I imagine more earthy alcoholic beverages would be very much appreciated by her. The color black, due to her association with crows, brown and green due to her association with the earth, red due to her association with blood, including menstrual blood if you are female, of course, and white due to her association with rebirth and the moon. So I suppose that that would also include silver, therefore, the lunar aspects, the lunar energies, and I suppose then as a result also to a lesser extent, I guess blue, although I personally don't really get that feeling from her. I will leave it up to you, the practitioner, who individually, of course, connects with this particular deity, to leave it up to you to decide what you would want to offer and what you feel she would appreciate from you. Offerings of blood, and especially if you are a woman, as mentioned, menstrual blood may be given and would be appreciated. Crow's feathers may be given as offerings, for example, statues of her and or one of her aspects, devotional acts in her name, as is in this case, in my case, this video, acts of courage, bravery that are devoted to her or carried out in her name, or because she has, inspired you to do something that you would not normally do but have wanted to do or feel you need to do, etc. She would also, of course, appreciate that, because she is a goddess of war, of battle, of conflict, and in that sense, I suppose that you could also express your desire to bring out the inner warrior and face trials and tribulations that you would not otherwise be willing or able to face. But if you bring that out in yourself, if you face the challenge that you're facing head on and overcome it, I'm sure that that would make Morrigan very proud. So that pretty much concludes my relatively short video on Morrigan. I hope that it was up to your expectations. I hope that it was to your liking. Please like, comment, subscribe. My next video will be on the deity Inari Okami from the Japanese Shinto pantheon. The deity of agriculture, of finance, of abundance, of many other things related to income, finance, and abundance. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.